Joining us on the line now is Bill Etheridge, who was the former UKIP MEP for the West Midlands, who has recently defected to the Libertarian Party UK. First things first, Bill, how are you?
I'm very well, how are you?
Yeah, good, thank you. Thank you very much for coming on. Of course, you announced at Libertarian Party conference that you had left UKIP and that you joined the Libertarian Party. Before we get into kind of what's going on in UKIP, why did you decide that the Libertarian Party was your home?
Because I've always held libertarian views. Most of my political beliefs are sort of advised by the principles of libertarian thinking. When I joined UKIP, that was one of the things that appealed to me, was that at the time it was selling itself, and in many ways was a party influenced by libertarian thought. But over the years, obviously, that's changed, and, you know, a logical thing for me to go to a party that I believed in. Plus, it takes away any accusation of someone saying, oh, you know, you're doing it for your career so you can go and get another seat in a big party, a comfortable home, because obviously the Libertarian Party is not currently one that wins too many votes in elections. So, you know, no one can say I'm going for an easy ride.
I was going to ask you about that because obviously if you look at the representation of the Libertarian Party, it's obviously fair to say that they haven't cut through electorally. I mean, I appreciate it's early days. I know you're the deputy chairman, but what are realistic ambitions, would you say, for the Libertarian Party going forward? Is it building from the ground up on council level, or is it trying to get a national message across?
First and foremost, I think we need to look at getting candidates in place to fight in council elections. There are elections coming up in May. And one of the things that I'll be talking to my colleagues about is trying to get a reasonable slate of candidates forward for that, because nothing sells a message, nothing makes people understand what you're about more than someone being on the doorstep or being in the town centre with the table days and so on. It's the way to get the message over. In the longer term, to get the party and the message better known, I guess it's down to the prominent members, including myself now, to try and get ourselves on the media and get talking.
And again, early days, but from what you've seen so far of the kind of the party and the state it is now, the mechanics of the party, do you think there is a real kind of vision that you can pursue within the Libertarian Party?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the first and foremost thing that I've noticed is, this is going to sound quite sort of a strange statement, but the level of intelligence and education amongst the people who are involved in it. This is not a group of people who sort of randomly come together united by one or two pet obsessions or hates. This is a party of people who've thought this through in great detail. And I think when you've got that basis, what you need to do is then sort of translate it into the language of the everyday and take it out there and sell it to the people on the streets as to how it will help their lives directly. I think the potential for that is absolutely huge.
Now, I appreciate it's never easy leaving a political party or indeed deciding which party to move to. Now, a lot of your colleagues, or a fair few of them, have considered joining the Tory party in recent weeks. I know there was obviously the story of Stephen Wolfe and Aaron Banks having their memberships rejected, essentially. And Godfrey Bloom, I think, tweeted, I think it was yesterday or a couple of days ago, that he applied to join the Tories. Not sure if that's gone through, but in terms of the Tory party, of course, you're a former member. Did you ever consider joining back with your old party?
No. I understand why people are trying to do that. I think the movement sort of changed things from the grassroots up and put pressure on the Conservatives to be actually Conservatives. I can understand why they're doing that, but when I was a member back in 2009, 2010, I was involved with people in the Tory party who were trying to do that then. And the levers of power are so controlled by the established men in grey suits that I'm afraid, although I wish people well who are trying to do this and make this change, I'm afraid it's virtually impossible. I think they're, for very good reasons, wasting their time. I think they'd be better off joining the Libertarian Party and actually trying to, build something up that doesn't have this built-in establishment control already there.
And what do you think, just broadly, finally on that, on them having their memberships essentially rejected or not being able to join the Tories? I mean, were you surprised about that? And do you think that them trying to join the party, do you think there was any realistic chance of reforming it from the inside?
I think there's zero chance of reforming it from the inside unless it falls to a catastrophic electoral defeat, which in the national interest, I hope doesn't happen, because that would let in the Marxists of Corbyn, and that's the last thing we want. I understand why they were trying to do. I'd never thought they'd get away with what they were trying to do. They announced in advance, we're joining the Conservative Party to change it. They blew a great fanfare saying they were coming. Well, it gave the establishment their time to prepare and time to rebut them and stop them joining. It was a rather optimistic strategy, I thought.
Now, of course, Bill, you announced your defection during Libertarian Party conference. That kind of has echoes of UKIP conference when, of course, Mark Reckless and Douglas Carswell announced at that conference that they were leaving the Tories and joining UKIP. Obviously, I appreciate you probably didn't decide the day of the conference to join the Libertarians. How long have you been pondering that decision to possibly join the party?
I hadn't been pondering for long because I was determined to try and hold out with UKIP, to try and, as I have done, obviously not as effectively as I'd have liked for some years now, trying to fight the Libertarian corner to try and stop the party going down the more nationalist route. I was determined to fight it, but it just became apparent, and after the UKIP conference itself, where some new policies were put out which included nationalisations, and it appeared that the leadership have got huge support from a lot of new members who've joined the party, it just occurred to me, you're banging your head off a brick wall. The best way to be effective is to actually join like-minded people, and I'd had a brief meeting with people to do with the party, looked at what they stood for, and I thought, yeah, this is the one for me.
And Bill, what do you make of how Gerard Battern, of course, the leader of UKIP, how do you think he's done so far? I appreciate there's probably a reason why you've left the party. Is it a lot to do with him?
Well, I want to be complimentary in some ways. He helped steady the finances of the party. He's created an upturn in the number of members, which is interesting because quite a few people have left, so the actual number of people joining is quite a high number. He's also very effectively internally taken over the whole mechanism of the party and driven it in another direction. So in terms of those things, hats off to him. But in terms of the direction that the party's going in, which is very, very nationalist, very hard language when it comes to dealing with issues of multiculturalism and things like that, I think that it's a dead end. I think that they could end up being a mass membership party with virtually no voters outside of the membership, because they basically frighten them all off with the strength of the rhetoric and with the sort of stone-faced, grim message that Gerard tends to put across, most notably recently on the BBC with Joe Coburn. I just don't think that's attractive to voters in this country. I think it's something that his supporters will cheer from the rafters, and everyone else will look at it and think, no, that's far too ragged for me, far too hard-edged. It's not where I want to be.
Now, if we look at the opinion polls, it's clear that UKIP haven't reached the heights of anywhere near 2015 or, of course, the successes you had in the 2014 European elections. Gerard Battern's leadership, of course, there is an element of that, but in terms of the leadership of Paul Nuttall before that, do you think he is to bear some brunt of the blame as well?
I think the problem with Paul, Paul's I make no secret of the fact he's a friend of mine, and I think he's a good guy. But I think that he surrounded himself with the wrong advisors at the time. I think he made some mistakes. And I think everything happened in a hurry. Stoke by-election, general elections being called. It was all before he'd really managed to make the reforms and changes he was looking at doing. But the real truth of the matter is, whether it be Gerard, Paul, whoever else has put their hand to it, Nigel Farage leaves impossible shoes to fill. He is the greatest politician of his generation, without doubt in my mind. And frankly, when he left, there was no natural successor, and left the leadership rather than the party. And I just think, from that point on, we were struggling, and Nigel's sheer force of personality and charisma had held together this disparate bunch of people with quite a few different views of broad church, if ever there was one. And without him there at the helm, I'm afraid the party was lurching downward ever since.
And of course, I know you've left UKIP, but you are still an MEP, and I believe, do you still sit with a lot of the UKIP MEPs with Nigel Farage on that? I forgot.
EFDD.
EFDD.
Europe of Freedom and Direct Democracy.
And are you still a member? Do you still sit on that?
Oh yeah, I'm still within that group. I still take the same voting list as UKIP. That side of it hasn't changed. So in terms of the European mandate, I'm really just still doing exactly the same as I was. It's a domestic change rather than anything that is different in Europe.
And can you ever see UKIP recovering in the future, Bill?
I'd love to say yes. I really don't mean to wish any ill to UKIP. There's a lot of good people in it, but I do think that they are now committed to this route of Gerard's leadership, and it gives me no pleasure to say it, but I'm afraid he's leading them over the edge of a cliff. I just don't see going anywhere with him as leader. He's not the man for it.
And lastly, on UKIP, Bill, of course, there was a story a while ago that Tommy Robinson was potentially going to be joining UKIP, and he was rejected by the NEC. What were your thoughts on that? Would you ever be comfortable being in a party with Tommy Robinson?
That's a difficult one, because I'll say this for Tommy Robinson. He's a far sharper cookie and a better communicator than Gerard Battern and many of the people at the top of UKIP, or in fact, the politicians. He's got a lot better over the years at his communication. However, there's a principle. Nigel put in a rule that saying people of prescribed organisations weren't allowed to join UKIP because he didn't want a huge lurch to the far right with taking lots and lots of people who changed the shape of the party. Now, if you allow Tommy Robinson in and you break that rule, then the precedent is set. And frankly, you can be flooded by tens of thousands of people who are perhaps not changing the way that he seems to have done, and you change the party altogether. I think actually those floodgates are already open because I don't think people are being vetted the way they were anyway. So I think in terms of the current state of UKIP, Tommy Robinson joining or not doesn't make any difference. They're going down the route that he would probably support anyway.
And Bill, in terms of your work with the Indigo Group, I see that you published "We Want the UK and Europe to be Prosperous, Happy and at Peace," obviously with the EFDD. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that? Yeah,
well, we tried to put together some ideas for post-Brexit scenarios so that we could say to people, look, the argument about independence has become really stagnant and negative and hate-filled on both sides. And what we tried to do with our booklet there is to say, look, here are some of the things that we could do, some changes to policies on taxation and the economy and trade, just some different ways forward. Now, you might not agree with them, but what we're saying is that outside of the EU, we have the scope to make these kind of changes. Have a read of what it says. If you agree with it, please take the ideas and promote them. If you don't, we'll have a debate about it. But the idea is that outside of the EU, we can do things in a better way and be peaceful, happy and prosperous.
And Bill, last question before we let you go. I've seen that you are a member of CAMRA and you fronted the campaign West Midlands Save the Pub. Of course, there are serious issues when it comes to pubs, but what's your favourite pint?
My favourite pint is a pint of mild, and it's Ruby Mild, which they do in Sedgley at my local pub, the Beacon Hotel. Brew it at the back. They do send it out to festivals. If you get a chance to try it, it's very strong, very dark, quite sweet, and once you've had two or three, you feel very mellow with the world.
You're making me thirsty. It's too early, Bill. Bill, thank you very much. Bill Etheridge joining me on the line. Thank you very much for speaking to us.
My pleasure. Thank you.